I'm Stan Lee. I've been writing stories for the young generation for the past 30 years, and in the course of that time, well, I would imagine I receive about 200 to 300 fan letters every day, probably as much as the Beatles. I spend most of my time reading the mail and quite a lot of time answering it. Today's show will cover subjects that we feel are uppermost in the minds of young people and, in fact, most of the people in the nation. Things such as Vietnam, rebellion, what the young generation really wants, the hippie rebellion, of course, and that old warhorse, sex. Our guests today are hip and they're interesting, and we hope you'll find the show the same. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the $1 Million Mailbox. Our guests are hip and interesting. Now let me bring them, i.e. him, in right now. Larry, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Dan. It's so weird when you don't call me Captain Fun now.
That's your persona. I feel like we have personas on different, you know what I'm saying, properties.
I just never. Oh yeah, really? I try to have Captain Fun wherever I go, man.
Because I don't know who this Captain Fun guy you're talking about, or like that any other thing about like science fiction or Star Trek. Like
you're a comic book guy,
comics
right?
pal.
Yeah,
Larry.
you're a comic book guy. I got it. Me too. I'm sporting my MTV today. I was feeling very Generation X when I woke up today. So Rick Austin was a MTV alumni.
Hollywood Big Shot Rick Austin?
Hollywood Big Shot Rick Austin's first job out of college was working for MTV in New York. And then he moved to Burbank.
Is that a good move?
I just make fun of him. I mean, it's what you got to do, right? It's
like
a
business. It's the only.
It's like yelling at a golfer, like, "Oh, you're on the links all day." It's like, yeah, that's what you got to do, man. Right? So it's just a funny pose. I've known the guy forever, so it's just a funny little.
I'm glad you had time to join me today, Larry, because I recently had Tom Scioli on the show. He's a indie guy who, I picked up his stuff. Early 2000s, he had this really weird book called The Myth of Eight Opus, with the number eight opus.
Yeah, that wasn't the Kubrick one, was it? The 2001 Space Odyssey one?
No, well, it was super Kirby-ish before he did Godland and before he did any of that stuff.
Godland, that's what I'm thinking.
Godland is the one you probably know him from.
That's where, because that was Joe Casey, right?
Yeah,
that's when I first got.
Well, he does all kinds of stuff, but his last book I read from him was the comics biography of Jack Kirby, which was really good. Although I have some notes on why this one we're going to look at today is an improvement over that one. I'm trying hard to say I didn't like the one part I didn't like about his Kirby book. I'll just be honest, was he made a decision to draw Jack Kirby himself as like a sort of almost anime looking character with big eyes, but nobody else in the book that way. And it does lend a sort of empathy to the character, but it also in some ways feels took me out of the story a little bit.
That's cool. I think that's awesome. Like that's totally what he was intending to do, right?
That's what
Jack Kirby's the king, man. He's going to be perceived differently than everyone else.
Okay, I give it to you.
I mean, whether it works or not for the individual reader is a completely different story, but I totally get that he did that.
Yeah. Well, in this one, he went sort of a different way, more of a documentary style, and employed some really interesting choices in the page layouts and stuff. We'll get to totally nerd out on stuff like that and look at that. And I figured we could talk a little bit about Stan Lee and about the eternal question. I know. Little known fact, folks. Captain Fun's favorite topic of conversation is to have. He needs to have like a really firm opinion about who was better, Jack or Stan. Right? Like this is the thing you love.
It's funny because I'm known for having pretty strong opinions about stuff, but that's only
That's what's funny about this.
But that's only for subjects that I feel like I know a little something about.
Okay.
You know? So that's why I don't have strong opinions about cartoons, because it's just like I don't
Out of your
really know.
bailiwick.
Yeah. So
it's not your wheelhouse. I get
the
it.
Stan and Jack thing is just epic, and I'm not learned enough in it to have picked a side. I'm completely up to date on what it is, what everybody's troubles are. And because I came to it as an adult and I didn't live through it, like some of our buddies like Bob Bierbaum and, Roy Root was kind of into this too, but more, he didn't really pick a side, but he had opinions,
You
So
know,
that
we
was
knew what Rory thought for sure.
It's a cool thing to chew over, but it's more like people treat it like, fucking Allies and Axis in World War II, and it's almost less filling tastes great. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
McCartney, Lennon, sort of like the closest thing you can get to that. And it's like, what the fuck? You can't get what you got without both of them together. Essentially, it's just maybe the mix and the amount of credit. And
look, so can I briefly tell you? Hopefully I like to babble, but briefly, I came to comics as an art form before I could actually read, right? So I learned to storytelling and all the tropes of comics before I knew what the characters were saying to each other.
I think a lot of people that way. Totally.
So an artist like Kirby is just brilliant for that, because he's telling a story. You can take the word balloons off it and still know what's going on.
Agreed.
So as a kid, though, I didn't like Kirby because his angular stuff was way too adult for me. Like, it had sharp edges, and I didn't like sharp edges because you could knock your tooth out on those things. And so his angular bits of stuff that I love as an adult, right? The 2-page splash where Commandy's jumping, it almost looks 3D, scared the shit out of me when I was a little boy, right? Because most comics didn't look like that.
Yes.
So if you got a guy who draws like that, and he's hooked up with another guy who is just powering out, he's copywriting, right? He's not writing like all the fans think now, that everybody's got their tweed jackets on with the leather things, and you're puffing your pipe and you're like, "Lo, there shall come a herald to the Galactus." It's not like that. Stan's fucking blowing it out, and Jack is blowing it out, and everybody's trying to, of course there's going to be personality conflicts, but unless you work with those guys at the time and were privy to some of their conversations, it's a giant game of he said, she said. So I'm not invested in that at all.
I feel you there.
Yeah.
I mean, Kirby.
That said, fucking Stan's the man.
Okay, you can take because for me, I definitely knew Stan Lee before I ever heard of Jack Kirby, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing I remember about Jack Kirby is I remember as a kid I read this issue of Avengers that had Captain America solo in the Avengers mansion. Everybody teamed up on him. They said this group of bad guys like, "Oh, it's only Cap there. He's the weakest. Let's go take him on." And of course, Cap kicks their ass. But the action, the style, the flow of action was like, I couldn't believe it. And it just made me the instant Captain America fan. And it wasn't until much later that I realized, I'm like, oh, that was what they were talking about. Because that was what it was supposed to do. It wasn't supposed to have like old dudes like us being like, oh, yes, his style was blah. It was supposed to get kids and like hit them in the face with something. And he's the king for that, and acknowledged by everyone, including Stan himself, right? Like,
yeah, me too. And in fact, I had the exact same story. It might have been a little later than you, because I was just talking about Jack's art when I was a boy, but when I was 13 and the bicentennial bomb came out, I had the exact same reaction you did. This storytelling and layout and sense of the pace, and was just fantastic. And holy shit, that's Jack Kirby. And I know about Captain America. This is fantastic. So that's when I became a Captain America fan, because of Jack. And that's cool. That's appropriate.
That's right. As much
Way to
as you
go.
might love like Murphy Anderson or something, like great artist, right? But like, and then you look at a Jack Kirby story contemporaneously and be like, oh, he's going in all. It's a whole new type of comic storytelling going on.
It's cool because you picked a guy that's like a colleague of his, right? A contemporary.
Yeah.
So like, but it's just, Murph was like Mr. 50s, right?
And it's top notch, right?
It's fine. Yeah, no, I mean, it's great, but there's just a, 1950s is a cliche now. I don't even think you can get in trouble. Like, people are just thinking the nuclear family, black and white world, right? I mean, you're not really taking a shot at anybody because that's how the world was, right? And so I don't mean to. His craft was amazing. His art and storytelling. Murphy Anderson's the best.
Sure.
But Jack at the same time is like, you can just, if you told somebody a story in some kind of game show where it's like, one of these two comic book artists was two-fisted Nazi puncher in World War II, you would pick Jack instantly. He'd just be sitting there, and yeah, that's me, I guess. Brooklyn all the way. I'd swear, but we're on TV.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. The only thing I give to Stan is like, he is an inescapable element in the editorial debut of that Marvel universe, and just did amazing things in that way. I give him at least, and well, we'll get into this when we look at the book, Larry. Let's take a look at this book, because there's moments in it where I feel like his creative input and co-input went up and down depending on certain projects.
I wonder if, of course, but I wonder if I have this issue because I also am talent, but I also love the marketing aspect. And one of the things that made our company good was that, I was Stan Lee of the 21st century. You can Google that, and people said that a lot at the turn of the century. And so all the stuff that people give Stan shit for is stuff I admire, right? Like, I don't care, like, who wrote what and is responsible for what and who got the credit and all that shit, because you had a guy who was doing the work and a guy who's basically a hype man. And like you said, Lennon and McCarthy, that's how things work.
Yeah, right.
There's nobody that can do all aspects of creativity. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But if you link up with somebody cool, like, I babble, but you keep me on track, and this is a great show.
Well, speaking of which, let's dive right in right now and look at this thing, because there's a place that we do that. You know what it's called? It's called the $1 Million Mailbox. All right, here we go. $1 million make you holler mailbox. Wait a minute.
So this is Tom's. How do you pronounce his last name?
Scioli, like aioli, I guess.
I guess that's good if you order Italian sandwiches a lot.
Yeah,
sounds like. Can I get a foot-long Scioli, please? No onions, but extra time. Put some extra time on that.
Okay, this is slightly. Oh, I'm gonna put on the old $1 million. I'm gonna make a $1 million spectacle of myself, and see if I can do this. Make this happen. Oh yes, I can actually see it. Oh, this is nice. Okay, great.
Ooh, now it's a class act because he's got an author's note right away.
Yeah, and this this note to self.
Oh, what a douchey thing to say. I didn't mean it like that. I did mean it a hair snarky, but like, I also meant it puts the audience on notice that, even if he's not messing around. That's a good package of book. It's got that cool, like, gloss hold. Got
the spot gloss on it. It's a beautiful hardcover. I got sent this for free, by the way, from, I think, the distributor, I guess Random House, because the publisher says 10 speed, but they might be a imprint. I'm not as hip to the real publishing world.
Huh.
Except one thing I know is that they're the guys that actually send me copies of books, real hard cover copies of books. And so I love that, and I will always support those. But of course, I interviewed Tom, and we talked about this at length. I got all Tom's input on a lot of this stuff, but I was really looking forward to hear his. Or really looking forward to read the book and see what comes out of this. And it isn't quite what I expected, and it's a lot more nuanced than I thought. And as I will admit, I have not finished the whole thing, but I was listening to and sort of semi-watching that Disney Stanley documentary thing, Disney Plus. I was surprised by the depth they go into the Ditko Lee Spider-Man beef. So I'll give them a little bit of credit for at least addressing it head on. Okay, this thing starts out this is kind of a he uses a widescreen style for a lot of this book. Like a lot of the pages are all full width panels. The height varies. Sometimes they'll be smaller and bigger, and it's a really interesting effect. I think it lends to a documentary feel of like you're watching almost a fixed aspect ratio kind of scenario, like through a camera lens. Okay, of course, right away we break it on the second page, but as you'll see,
no, but I totally get what you say. There's a horizontal and vertical aspect to these layouts.
Okay, let's see here. Yeah, and so I love this. This one is great because these are all Stan in various parts of his career, and he goes through this weird metamorphosis, because he was bald at a pretty early age, and he's like somehow his hair gets stronger as he gets older. It's nice. And then finally, fades back a little bit. But what a stash. Oh, they go into the origins of the stash too.
You can see Stan was a master marketer, right? And so of course that goes for the presentation of Stanley Lieber's, Stan Lee. Yeah.
Yeah. How about Tom's choice of colors on this? I love it. I love the page is a nice matte. There's no glossiness at all to it. So it looks great on the $1 Million Comics Can, which I think more and more publishers are aiming. They're saying like,
yeah, it's got to look good on Dan's show.
It's got to look good on this show, right? Or why?
The one thing I'd ask him though is like, what's with the blue and yellow and orange? And I don't know. That's all.
I think what I like about the kind of lack of backgrounds throughout, it's got a really interesting layered effect the way he does it, that it just made it extremely readable. And I think it would be very readable to the casual non-comics fan because you don't have a lot of like panel direction choices to make. You can just kind of read it really easily.
Yeah, I got you.
And by the, you work on a book like this over a period of years too. And I'm not sure if he did all the coloring all at one time or if he did it as he went along. That'd be a good question to ask him.
It's like, I'm not a giant fan of color comics either, but if you do it, you need sort of, I pay attention to the color palette choices, right? There's the reboot of The Italian Job. It's directed by F. Gary Gray. He did this cool thing where they're globetrotting. So there's like 4 major cities, and each city has its own color palette. Like Vegas is yellow, right, and London is red. So I started thinking about that with colorists who do that, and Hollingsworth's really good for this. Matt Hollingsworth, he chooses like a color palette that goes through scenes. And so, like, I don't know if it was the last page or the page before it. Like, it looks like it changes scenes.
Yeah.
Not the one before this.
Yeah.
See the page on the right? Like, the first bit is that guy talking to the girl in the chair, and then, like, is it the same kid? But he's got 3 different colored shirts on, and then he's on a bike later. It's like all out
Mhm.
that
I
that's
think they're snapshots in time, and I think he's trying to separate them that way.
oh, okay.
Maybe
But
with the
so
color.
then the bad thing is then the background's all the same palette. Right? It's like he should have made the backgrounds
Well,
not
there's a slight difference here. I think
purpley
that's he
gray.
actually did do that because I think
Yeah,
this
did he?
is
All
like
right.
the time. This is a moment in time. It's slightly different.
Like,
It's not
yeah,
maybe not
cool.
that obvious on first blush, but when you read it,
Yeah,
that's the sort of
it addresses
detail
that.
that
Yeah, that's cool.
you won't even notice, but you'll feel, and it'll help you to realize it's the same person at a different moment in time. He's pulling off a tricky thing because, oops, he's
That
stitching
was awesome.
together. He's stitching together so many sources, and he goes into this. He went into this in the author's note, and I really wanted to point out this moment. This is one of those apocryphal moments from a story that Stan told about his days back in school, and he wrote Stan Lee is God. The only problem with this story is he didn't go by the name Stan Lee yet. He was still little Stanley Lieber. So there's somebody actually on the internet who's like, oh, and here's Tom Scioli whitewashing Stan stories again and like just telling the same old stuff.
Oh man.
But if you check, there's a footnote in the back of this, and it's like it says he didn't go by it yet. This is the story that Stan told, and it's apocryphal. So he footnoted it, but he made the choice that made it more of an interesting storytelling choice, I guess.
Plus, I don't even really think that's that hard to believe because his name is Stanley.
Totally, he probably used that.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? He might have written Stanley as God on there, and just but for the story, the audience to get it, you just write Stan Lee. I have no problem with that whatsoever.
I feel like he probably
leave Tom alone. I feel like I should be crying. You just leave Tom alone, you people on the internet.
So we get a lot of the the tough youth story, and I'm gonna give it to Stan. He's like his dad was a dressmaker, in the garment industry, didn't do too well, and so Stan had to earn money and put food on the table and take care of his little brother Larry. Tough life. I give it to guys like that. So he was a hustler and a scratcher from the very beginning. He did get an in for sure to get his job. There was nepotism, right? Like he had his Uncle Martin.
Nepotism.
But give that chance to a million nephews and see how many Stan Lees you get out of it, right?
I just love that though, as like it means anything. It's just like literally a big pile of sour grapes, right? Like everyone since the beginning of time has used somebody they know in some manner to, get their kid a job or, open a door somewhere or have an introduction to somebody that's going to help you in business. Like I hate that. But the reason that's come up in our house is not just because of Walker's book in San Diego, but we're loving the new Justified, and the teenage girl who plays Raylan's teenage daughter is actually Timothy Oliphant's teenage daughter, and he has two girls, and one's a tennis pro and one's an aspiring actress, and so he comes home and the actress is all sad because she's reading the comment section and they called her the nepotism girl. And so because Timothy Oliphant is hilarious, he thinks that's the best thing ever and calls up the tennis pro and says, hey, they're calling your sister the nepotism girl. And she goes, put her on. And then she goes, how many times I hear I'm the tennis daughter? And so it kind of made her feel better. But, what are you supposed to do? Nepotism.
I mean, nepotism. There used to be such a thing as a family business, right? And I think that there's still. Why can't there be something like that?
I just think Stan's 19 at the time, and his uncle owns a place. Like, really? Like that just. Oh, he's got nepotism. It's
okay. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that's a little bit galling in the long run. I think one of the reasons why maybe Jack was a little bit bitter is because Stan literally started as the copy boy, filling his inkwell. And, for him to attain the stature that he attained, while his name is not a household name in the way that Stan's is. And, maybe it should be.
I don't begrudge anybody their bitterness. I just think, sometimes things fall that way. And I don't get how fans need to have an opinion about it, other than to buy this book because this looks spectacular.
Well, I mean, I think everybody's got an opinion on it. I think to me, ultimately, it's one of those synthesis things. It's like it wouldn't have worked the same way without
I just don't
all
see how.
parties involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what are you talking about? Who did what to what percentage? It's like,
Well, however, though, okay, here's where in watching the Disney, I was listening to the Disney documentary while rereading this, and I didn't finish the Disney documentary, but they gloss over a couple things that like Stan, it's heavily implied in this book that Stan ratted out Jack Kirby for moonlighting at Timely, and that got him fired, and then that led to Stan becoming the editor not too long after. And if that's true, and I don't know that it's true, and it's not even really spelled out, it's just but it is heavily implied. You can't read this book without coming away with that idea.
yeah,
that's significant to me.
Just a good old Mark in the comments is going, Stan could never get anyone to hire him, and he tried, and it's just like, okay. I just don't. And then your thing
he
about
didn't need to. He had,
I just don't.
He had a deal for life with Marvel.
I don't get why anyone cares. This is the part I don't understand. It's like if everybody was on fire about it in the '60s when this was a thing, then okay. Hashtag, Jack Kirby. I get it. But like it's 2023. Like everybody's dead. The corporation Disney owns all the money. Like, what are you guys doing? Like there's not ever going to be justice for anyone.
Yeah, I feel it's just the fact that they go and they got multiple billion-dollar films that literally Stan is in them.
I know.
And like he has become this name.
Can I tell you? Let me tell you about Alan Booter.
Characters that he didn't even create. Specifically Captain America, right? Which was fully formed when Stan was a fan of Captain America when he joined the company.
Yeah. 3 people own all of Taylor Swift's catalog, and that's why she's doing her own versions. So you can literally buy 3 copies of the same song, and the royalties will go to 3 different people. That's just what happens. Well, let me tell you about old Stan and my hero, Alan Booter. Hey, Alan.
Wait.
He's the chief financial
officer. That again.
Alan Booter. Well, he's dead now. But see what this says to my greatest fan?
Mm-hmm.
That's because nobody knows who Alan Booter is, but he's the CFO of Colossal Pictures that was on Liquid Television on MTV.
Oh, okay.
And that guy, every single thing that started me off in my business, it was because I was following the advice of that guy. And one of the things, we were shooting the shit at lunch one time, and he just gets it into his head. This has to be 93. So he has the internet, what is the internet in 93, right? I don't think it's AOL yet, but he gets onto his computer and goes, blip, 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 and he finds, because he was a Marvel stockholder, he finds in their financial thing that Stan is getting the stipend of $1 million a year.
Yeah. Chairman emeritus or whatever he's.
I forget what it was listed at, but he like spins his giant ass computer around. He goes, read that, and comes back and he goes, that's what marketing is right there. And so I think that you're talking about 2 different things when you talk about Jack and Stan.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
It's
more like Walt Disney versus maybe like one of the great directors, great animation directors of his films or something like that. Like iWorks versus Walt Disney or something.
But it really isn't. It's like parents having children and then getting divorced and then trying to split up the children. That's what it is, right? It's like Captain America is Jack's kid from his first marriage, but Captain America thinks Stan's his dad. How do you figure that out? And that's literally what's going on. And then everybody in your neighborhood has an opinion about it. And then suddenly they make movies about your fucking soap opera, which is all this is.
Right.
And then the fucking people in China have an opinion about, which kid should live with which parent. I just think they're wearing different patches on Star Trek shirts, man. That's where my concern is.
Okay, so I can dig that. But I can also dig the fact that it's like, if you ask anybody who created Captain America, and if anybody who had an answer to that, 9 out of 10 of them will probably say Stan Lee.
But so what? It's over. They're dead. It's done.
It's just a bummer.
It's a bummer, but
even Bob Kane, Batman, like people would know Batman for Bob Kane, even though whatever, he didn't create Robin or whatever. But
I guess it's just that I've spent the last 10 years reading 3 posts a day on my Facebook thing from Bob Beerborn. So
sometimes the same post.
See, you're laughing because that's not an exaggeration.
Sometimes the same post. I love Bob's posts.
I love Bob
I
too,
can't
man.
wait for the 3-volume hardcover set, Comic Book Store Wars. It's coming. It's coming. And I've been promised the exclusive interview with Bob Beerbaum when that happens, because he is a fan of this show.
Is Ron Turner publishing that? Who's publishing it?
There might be a bidding war, but it's got to be ready.
Ron Turner's last gasp in San Francisco, so it seems like that's just a license to print money for those two guys.
The thing that I loved was Stan's hustle, trying to make money. But on the other hand, I feel like one of his scams was sort of like, ironically, more touched on almost in the Disney documentary than it is here, in the sense that when he realized, he would get paid by the script, and he was the editor, so he could hire himself to write scripts. And then if he's in the business with these artists who don't really need that much in the way of scripts, it did make his job a lot easier, and he could collect a lot more paychecks and a lot more bylines than somebody who was really co-involved with the day-to-day writing and
that's
the issue.
That's a pretty dense text right there. Look at that.
It gets dense. And this is where, though, I feel like this format that he's chosen pays off, because he can seamlessly blend in and out of this stuff. Like, this is a letter that the guy's writing, but like, there are big chunks with expositional dialogue and whatever.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
But it is extremely readable, I think, to the it's hard for me to say what a non-comics person could say, but I'm pretty sensitive to that kind of stuff. Like, if it's even a little bit confusing for me, then I know that like Joe Casual is probably lost on how to read a comic. This one, not many choices to make. So you get kind of a steady drip of info, and it reads at a nice pace, like a regular book would.
Yeah. It's an illustrated novel at that point, right?
Yeah, it almost is, yet it weaves in and out of
I mean, but it almost is, but obviously isn't,
exactly. Right? So that's why it's a good bridge.
Pretty cool,
for those people. The creation of Spider-Man is the one that's a really interesting one, because in the Disney documentary, Stan's talking about he was inspired by the spider in the pulps. In this book, it's heavily implied that it was like Jack Kirby came with it, something inspired from The Fly with pages, brought the idea to Stan, who then just said more like, let's give Steve a shot at this idea.
I see how that could happen too. I mean, didn't Jack did the cover for Amazing Fantasy 15?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I see how all that happened, but like, I don't care. There's so many. It's just, yes, the world is full of injustices. This is a giant one. Okay. All right. Like
And had a better agent, and a better.
I just.
Mark Evanier was saying this.
It's
This
a
is
done
really
deal. There's no way to make this right. That's my thing. So
it's the 40th anniversary of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and Mark Evanier, the guy who wrote Gru, you know him. I interviewed him once.
He was very nice to Mimi at San Diego.
He's the greatest. He's so nice to everybody. He's the only guy nicer than him is Sergio Aragones, who's like his buddy, right? So he but anyway, he wrote the series Bible for the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Which was a favorite of mine. I love. But he's like, it was almost nothing to me. And I've been gotten all this credit over the years. He's like, there's a lot of things you get no credit for, not enough credit. This is one of those rare things where he got way too much credit.
Right. Right. All the credit for something he crapped out. You know, but that's the thing about dealing with audiences. You have no control over what the audience does. You know?
Well, ultimately, though, he credited it to another writer said, hey, how come I didn't get the credit you did? He's like, I did more.
Go ahead.
Like, he said, I guess I had a better agent. What can I say? Yeah. Literally, what can he say?
Yeah.
I like this. I didn't realize that it was Ditko who came up with the idea of the corner box.
Oh, that's cool.
And they're like, yes, let's do that. And it like was better than those dumb DC go-go checks. It was distinctive, but that was a little much. Let's see. Yeah. Stan. He had a business savvy that nobody else did. Stan is definitely more along the lines of a Will Eisner. Will Eisner, who was like the true cartoonist, but even Stan was cartooning. Like in the military, he was drawing anti-venereal disease cartoons and stuff.
Yeah.
And teaching accounting with comic strips.
The thing with Stan is the thing that the Coen brothers write in The Big Lebowski as a joke for the Sam Elliott character, that the thing about the dude is there's a man for his time and place. And that's the thing about Stan. Is that and why people said that about me, because I had a similar career track that I started working for an advertising agency as a paste up artist, a graphic design grunt, and I parlayed that into a hourly job at a printing place. But my job was the production coordinator, so I had to deal with every aspect of it. Like I talked to the publisher, I talked to the editor, I talked to the head of sales. I talked to the art director who made all the ads for sales, and I brought all that shit to the strippers of the guys who made, the actual film to do their stuff, their advertising. And in the end, so then that's how I could do comics, because I learned that entire job from beginning to end. And so that's what these guys should do. That's all I'm saying. That's why I love Stan, because he was like a mailroom guy or whatever, but he had to deal with every single person in
dude, he had side hustles on the side. He wrote like one of the first how do you write comics books, and is like, send $1 bill in an envelope to Stanley's home and he will send you a copy of this book that he did. And then he would make joke books and gag books and all kinds of other things.
That's
photo books, his captioned photo. Yeah,
how does anybody hate on that guy?
No, I mean, he did draw a little bit.
He took false credit for okay, whatever. Who cares?
I get it. I'm just saying Stan was in the publishing business almost more than he was strictly in the comics business.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, that was his thing. And he was good at it.
But that's the thing, and that's what fans forget, is that comics is a business. It's commercial art. Like, so there's commerce and there's art. So there's art, but to enjoy the art, you must buy it, right? So that's where Stan and Jack come from, right? Jack's doing the art. Stan's giving you the ability to buy it. And, you don't like how it all shook out. I don't care after that, right? It doesn't matter to me, because everybody gets screwed about everything from all time since the beginning of time. So, all right. That's
what I love about this book is it's truly tries to be a documentary. I mean, it's obviously completely subjective in the choice of what he drew and wrote, but it doesn't give you draw any conclusions. It just puts these things out there and lets you draw your conclusions from it. I love this moment.
I love that Mark Clegg has a personal vendetta against Stan here.
I know Mark is I've known Mark since I was a little kid.
Oh yeah.
Mark Clegg used to buy comics at the shop and I would pull Mark's comics. Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Mark was the only guy who ordered really cool indie underground independent books at that store at all. So it's only because of the stuff this guy Mark Clegg ordered that I got exposed to the weird shit that I shouldn't have at far too tender of an age. I owe you, Mark Clegg. I salute you for that, Mark Clegg.
What a great story.
Yeah. That's why I got a place in my heart for guys like him, guys like Bob Bierbaum, guys like anybody who's got a chip on their shoulder and some time to spend and a lot of knowledge in something that does not matter at all. And that even better, not better, but just so deliciously ironic that like Stan won this fight in the public consciousness. Like he won.
Maybe that's what's fueling it.
And so these guys will always get to feel like they can be rebel. You know, you can be a rebel if you know the truth about Stan.
Yeah.
I remember the one time my one experience meeting Stan. Okay. And we were doing his website for the infamous stanlee.net when I was working at Organic Online in San Francisco. I was the only person in the company who even read comics at all, knew anything about comics. And so I was like drooling when I heard we did this, and I got invited to meet him. So I brought in a copy of the Silver Surfer graphic novel that he wrote that Jack Kirby drew. Okay. And it was like published as a book. It was one of the early graphic attempts at graphic novels.
Totally remember.
And the one thing I remember coming away from that is how effusive he was in his praise of Jack Kirby in our meeting together. Maybe he knew because I was a fan that I knew about the controversy. Or
the story.
But whatever. He went out of his way to just say, yes, whatever I did was okay. But really, Jack was the star of the show in that book. So that's all I know from my own personal meeting with the guy. So I give that as one facet in the subjective jewel. But I love this next couple moments because this is the moment when after Ditko left Spider-Man and they thought maybe, you couldn't keep the magic because of what Ditko was. And there was nobody like Ditko. And so they bring on Jazzy John Romita and not realizing that Jazzy John, he felt like he couldn't live up to it, but he's like, no matter what, John is going to draw the hell out of whatever you give him to draw. He's got a mortgage to pay and he's going to do it. It's going to just be wow. So here's the moment, the infamous Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. Like this is Stan seeing it for the first time. Just notice the way it's different. The camera starts to change. This is a moment when things started to change for Stan too. I love it. Here on the next page. Like this is because if you remember, then it wasn't, I think it was not long after that, this, and I wish they had talked about this in this book or somewhere else, but they never talked about the Spider-Man cartoon, that Stan narrated, the classic one with the classic theme song, and like how that was probably the biggest thing to propel Spider-Man into public consciousness. More than the comics had to be that cartoon. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that happens today, right? Like nobody cares until you reach a perceived level of success, right? So, hey, congratulations, Neil Gaiman, selling 10,000 copies of a comic. What have you done lately? And man, right. Neil Gaiman, speaking of marketing, right? Neil Gaiman goes, well, you don't understand. I had 10,000 people order my book like 3 months ago, where a best-selling New York Times book is like 3,000 copies, right?
Right.
And so then everybody goes, oh, you've put it into our language now. And then Neil's a best-selling New York Times author immediately, right? So, but that's just a perception issue, right? It's like, oh, New York Times best-selling author. That's why.
Good point.
I think those.
That's a fucking great point.
I think those guys that say that they're
French.
New York Times best-selling authors who write like X-Files books and Star Trek stuff, they crack me up.
The best one is the Amazon bestseller list. Right?
Oh, well, great. I mean, I'm never gonna take that level of stuff away from people, right? I too am part of the award-winning comic book publishing house Planet Air, right? I mean, does it matter what those awards were? I have them. They were actually awarded.
Okay, well, back here.
Anyway.
And Mark Clegg, don't get fired up. Nobody's lumping you in with anybody. Don't worry about it. We love you. I love everybody who's ever watched or ever watches this channel. God bless all 5 dozen.
Absolutely. Nobody means anything.
Okay, this is great. This is the moment I came in on the show. I came on Stan Lee introducing the Stan Lee talk show.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
And so when I brought Tom in, I showed him that too, and he's like, "Oh, it's so interesting that you came in on that," because he goes into it. I mean, this is so much of it is in here.
Well, that's kind of a seminal moment for where, if people who are mad at Stan, it could have gone worse if this had succeeded. He might be thought of as like, the beatnik Johnny Carson or something.
He was so stiff in that, but then man,
he really was.
Dude, I saw one of him on Tom Snyder, and I think John Lennon is on the show with him.
Oh, that's cool.
John Lennon was on a show with him on one of it, and he was definitely also on Tom Snyder. Might have been Tonight Show, but whatever. And he got so good. His rap became so good and smooth, and he gave very intelligent answers though too. Like he was Stan was really in it. Like he was a true storyteller. Like he was a writer for sure. Loved adventure genre fiction as well too. So I give him so much credit as a fan turned writer as well, and wanted to elevate comics and make them a little bit more adult than they were. God bless you, Stan. Nobody gives you any credit. When are we gonna flip? When is it gonna flip to that?
Oh my god, that's awesome. Yeah, really. I don't know if you guys know, but I've been championing Stan Lee since I was a boy. You guys are all Stan come lately people.
I like Stan, yeah, when it wasn't cool. Yeah,
even when I was a kid though, I totally bought into the whole Stan is a huckster. Like Stan's a guy who's like, hey, true believer. I just bought into that because I love the carnival barker scene. I love the whole, hey, kids, comics. Like, hey, I was talking to Jazzy John Romita the other day. It's yes, 100%. Oh,
it was his execution too. He didn't talk down to you at the same time. He was.
His editorial voice was not just conversational, but almost conspiratorial, right? Like, here's some shit we're getting past the boss. And I'm telling you the secret, true believer. That dude, you just think about that for a minute when you're stuck on all the obvious injustices that were portrayed in any way you can look at it. I'm telling you though, I think it's worth it for that shit that got people through the night sometimes. I really do.
Stan, I've got a great video I'm going to show before we get out of here. Little best of clip of Stan Lee talking with some cartoonists. That is it's really funny. We could talk about it while it's going.
You know what I love most about Stan Lee is that story you just told, that he was really stiff on the talk show thing, and then a year, 2 years later on Tom Snyder, he's got it down. But there's no media training in the early 60s, right? Stan figured that shit on his own by making goofy mistakes, right? You got to give it to him. You just have to. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was good. And yeah, to go from a kind of a nebbishy dude to what his image is kind of a swinging Stan.
He did the template though for everybody. He took Hugh Hefner's stuff, right? And went, You know who needs to get in on that? The people whose parents are taking the Playboys away from them. I'm going to give them their own little scene. And you know what? God bless you, Stan.
They talk about his cameo in Mallrats in here, and I don't even remember it.
What? Oh my God!
I barely remember, but I guess he talks about the story of the one that got away, the girl that got away, and then he had to go to Kevin and say, "Hey, look, man, if I tell that story, then the one that didn't get away is never gonna forgive me. So we gotta make this work." And he had to. And he comes back later and says that he made that story up in the movie. I thought that was pretty nice because he does seem like a guy who really loved his wife and.
Stan's doing a bit, everybody. You might as well get mad at Russell Brand for raping everybody. Like, didn't you see what he was doing? He was
is that a frog in the scorpion moment?
Yes, exactly. He's the raping everybody guy. He told
you let your 16-year-old daughter date him. Okay.
Yeah. What did you think? What did you think was going to happen? Of course, Stan's going to take credit. You know what though? This fucking $1 million mailbox, man. It's aptly named because you know how much money I spend every time the people send you cool shit. Like Shelley Bond did that Filth and Grammar book.
Yeah, I never really reconnected with her.
A million of people about that.
I got to bring her back in.
But then this book, oh my God.
Dude, here's the moment
of buy this. So yet another book that I have to buy.
There's Stan and Steve hugging it out at one point.
Well, I didn't need to see that, even in a drawing. Is that Kevin Smith? Talking to
Kevin Smith moment.
That's great.
I like Tom's style. It's got a spare line, but everyone counts. Like you can feel the intent on people's face and what he's trying to get forward. It's just a real, almost invisible storytelling style.
This is gonna sound super weird, but you talked to Tom. Do you know where he's from?
Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay. He looks so much like Bernie Moreau stuff. I'm like, he's not Canadian, is he? Like, but Pittsburgh, that's up there. It's cold in the winter.
It's close.
Does stuff to your drawing style. Look at Walt Simonson. He couldn't not draw a frost giant if he tried.
Are you talking with Howard Stern? Really good. I mean, I just love how. I mean, it's even like readable here, like in this format. Me leafing through it, like on screen.
No! Wait! Don't flip that page. Whoop. See that bottom panel where the word balloon goes right in front of right over the character's face. That's like 3 demerits. Did Tom letter this himself? Because he drew that across his own art, man.
Sponges, he got dinged by that.
No, it's just Walker and I. Obviously my kids learning all the different aspects of production, and so I sit there and spout all these rules like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this.
Well, show him the 1,000,001 storytelling techniques he can pick up from reading this book, though, for sure, because it's hard for me. Like, I often marvel at the books that are like readable.
Well, you know what this is. You know what an etude is in music, right? I don't know that I do. It's an experimental construct. It's a thing that shows you. It's like the musical version of the Quick Brown Fox Jumped Over the Lazy Dog.
Okay,
sure. You'll take a bit that shows a thing that you need to know how to do in piano, right? And so that'll feature their bigger pieces. Sometimes they're short things. Just shows you finger work and stuff like that. And that's when I see comic book page layouts like this, where I think of that, where it's like you pointed out right away that how cool it was that they're sort of widescreen panels. Very different depths, but widescreen.
Yeah.
And that's bananas good for paying attention to this story.
I think it is.
So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying about costing me money. I'm definitely buying this.
It's really,
Also a white belt for my Jackson copy.
It's such a conscious choice, and I know Tom thinks a lot about these things too. Like, so I know he was going for something, and I know I got a lot out of it. It's hard to define exactly what it is. I really do feel, because when I think of widescreen comics, I think of Millar, I think of the Ultimates, and I talked to Brian Hitch about that book too. And a big part of it is just that it's the fixing of the aspect ratio. It just makes it feel more like I'm watching a movie or watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Cinematic.
Yeah. But he did it here in a really cool way. And I think it might also lend to, like, I don't know, might make it so he can work on one panel at a time and rule them out. Maybe he slots them together. I don't know what his.
Oh, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know what his technique is exactly, but I believe maybe he'll come back. I believe he might be completely digital now.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Is it, Larry? Is it cool? It's pretty cool.
For this kind of experimental thing, sure.
I think it's great.
He's not using CG or AI in any way, right? So
it doesn't feel.
If his tools are digital. That
doesn't feel digital in any way, which is great. That's a testament to knowing how to use those tools really well.
I don't know. Look at that coloring, man. That's some digital coloring.
It's definitely digital coloring, but it doesn't feel overtly digital.
Right. I don't
garish gradients or image style, early 90s image style.
I was just being internet at you.
All right.
Well, actually, sir.
Copious footnotes for you nitpickers out there.
I love
looking at you, like Mark Clegg. So you can look it up and you can quibble, or you could write letters in longhand on college ruled notebook paper, whatever you want, whatever is your thing.
I have a varied collection of stamps, sir, for my sternly worded messages.
I'll say this about Tom. He's a cool guy. He's a cool cartoonist. He's got a super cool YouTube channel, Larry. You got to check out his it's got a Total Recall Project, it's called. Cool. And he just does stuff about whatever, and it's just fun. And he actually, like, edits it. It's not just long, rambly ass videos like me.
Yeah, what are you saying?
Is every time I have the urge to go back to one of these things and chop it up and edit, I go like, am I really going to spend 4 or 5 more hours on this conversation? It's tough for me to do.
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Certainly.
This book is a obviously nice art object on its own.
It is so beautiful.
I am personally right now, Clay, the reason I was available for this was I'm just working on my collection of loose cannon, the columns I did for Comic Book Resources, Jonah Whelan's Place of Awesomeness in 2001 to 2004. And there's one bit I'm running into from my 2 sources of the text. There's a couple missing from my somewhere on an older computer. So I'm just stealing them off the website, but swapping them over. The actual characters are slightly different. So I have a typesetting problem of the closed and open captions in a quotation, and are also represented by just straight up and down quotation marks. So I literally have to go through 50,000 words one at a time, searching for this out. And I find myself not giving an actual shit.
Dude,
I don't think it's worth the time or effort. Like, somebody's going to look at it and go, oh, that guy half-assed the typesetting, but I don't care.
I know. So it's tough to care.
I think that but I bring this up because I realize I want to apologize for poor Mark. It seemed like I was dismissing his thing, but it's more like it's me, right? That when I say I don't care, it's not so much that I don't care. It's that I'm dismissing whatever is important to the people it's important to. It's just that I'm recognizing that this is an important thing that I personally just don't have the RAM for it.
Ultimately, it's unquantifiable. Yet, I have figured out the exact ratio of credits that is appropriate to give.
Wow. So we get a summation here.
Yeah. Have you heard of something called the 80-20 rule, Larry?
I have. Yes.
Right?
Everything I say follows 80-20.
Right. So what is it? It's like 20% of your fans are 80% of your sales. That's one example of the 80-20 rule. Okay. And so I just think it sounds good. So I'm giving 8-20 to Stan just on GP for everything. And I'm giving 80% to Jack Kirby because there's no doubt Stan could have done everything he did. And if he wasn't with Jack Kirby and he wasn't with Steve Ditko, we wouldn't have any of those things that we have. Like they wouldn't be hits the way they were. Yeah. But I think you can almost say the same thing that if
you absolutely can say the same thing the other way.
In the opposite direction.
That's why I think it's 80-20 Stan over Jack if you're talking about marketing and, eyeballs and stuff. But it's 80-20 Jack if you think the, fucking cool ass open my brain and spew onto the page. Dan, I love Stan, but he's dancing.
Right. 80-20 though feels okay, right? 20% is a big chunk.
But that's why I think it's funny that people get so angry because it's like, well, your guy's the man depending on what you're talking about. I think that their overlap was only that they got together to make a baby that everybody loves called the Incredible Hulk, right?
And it's one of those whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly.
Right. So okay.
And but what's cooler than that even is that you can kind of look at anything that they did together, like say the Hulk, right? So you can tell Stan's going, okay, and it's got my ears and it's starting out gray, but I'll turn green later. And Jack's like, oh, but it's got my positive can-do attitude, and then that's your baby. I wish people thought more like that and then thought about specific stuff. Like, well, what do you think happened with, issue 57 or
okay. And then there's one more thing though, before we get out of here. I want to watch a little bit of video. We can watch it and pause it. It's a couple minutes only. It's a few different things. I think part of this might be that Stan Lee was probably definitely a world-class smartass and loved to make jokes at other people's expense often. And the only thing I have to prove
explain our thinking on how we're coming across and why we're doing over.
Oh, wait a minute. So I want to bring the let me preface this.
Wait, was that Todd McFarlane?
This is Stan Lee, Todd McFarlane, and Rob Liefeld working together, creating characters. The Marvel method. So imagine instead this is Stan Lee and Jack Kirby 30 years before this. Okay, I'm going to
think and draw at the same time.
We'll try to explain our thinking on how we're coming across and why we're doing overkill the way it is.
You can think and draw at the same time?
Yeah, and especially if it's going to be over.
Okay, come on.
He just stands having some laughs.
He's their hero.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Sometimes people don't realize. All right? I mean,
and Todd is coming off like such a bonehead too. It's great. It's great. Let's watch a little bit more.
I'm glad there's no film of me from the 80s. That's all I have to say.
Good point. Yeah, let's watch a little bit more.
Overkill. His equipment's got to be overkill as well.
Oh, heck yeah.
Always remember he's tough, but he's not violent.
Okay, along those lines, he's got the biggest shoulder pads ever existed. It's like
I figured he would.
Okay, I'm gonna give him some big knee pads here, because a guy like him that's got some armor and got some guns and stuff like that is gonna.
Boy, he looks grim, doesn't he?
This is great.
Kids, the kids like the dark, moody stuff. I mean,
they seem to.
I mean,
But I have a question I've been wanting to ask you guys. How long does it take these people to get dressed? These kind of characters.
Who says they undress?
I mean, there's something they have to get out quickly to save the world, but it takes them an hour and a half to get into all of this stuff if they work fast.
That's right. Getting into the costume is like going to the bathroom in comic books. You never show it, but you assume that Superman and Batman and Spider-Man actually do go and urinate every now and then, right?
You're right, but you never do show it, do you?
No.
I assume that Batman wears a diaper.
But you do show, very often you show people getting dressed, especially women. I seem to recall that now.
Yeah, no.
Do you draw hands? Are you into hands?
Oh,
really?
yeah, I'm the best.
You do hands?
But why don't you give them here?
By the way, I want to give credit.
Wires coming out here, coming down. Up.
They love that
the kids
stuff.
love wires.
The wires that he'll trip over.
Why don't we
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you draw good wires.
And the wires will trip over.
Does he have a double identity? Is he really a meek
Who,
accountant in real life?
who else could he be besides Overkill?
Well, I mean, when he takes off all these clothes, is he a
I don't.
97-pound
Do you see him
weakling?
taking rough fist? Okay.
Okay.
With his thumb, he would have 3 different cannons
Different,
that are
okay.
facing you for the large kapui. So right here, they could be like missile launchers or whatever, but he's gonna have those right over here.
What
And then
makes
this
you
guy's
make those
alive, too.
value judgments? Why only 3? He's got 4 knuckles.
'Cause-
the reader's
And then
crazy.
this-
Why does he have more on that side than that side?
No.
For the sake of our unseen viewers, is this really the type of thought process that you guys go through when you
Yes.
create characters?
Except for we have more than 20 minutes.
This is probably longer than you usually
We do.
take. Well, I think
Okay, there's
Oh
nothing
my
but
God.
contempt going on in this video. I love it so much. He by the way, this is H Bomber Guy on YouTube put together this clip. It's called Stanley Owns.
What's it
Look
from?
it up and check it out.
What were they doing? Is that some game show or something?
No, it was like a direct to video,
Oh.
like how to do
Yeah,
comics,
Drive Marvel. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Gotcha.
And there's a little-
I've got to say seriously, which isn't easy for me to do, but I think it's very impressive that in a matter of 20 minutes you guys could come up with something like this. I mean, bad as it is, it's still impressive that you were able to do it this quickly.
Well, we're,
Yeah, that's
Holy
a cool.
shit.
That is
Rob,
really
didn't you
cool.
promise that you would draw and we would do the talking? And
I'm
when
sorry,
you
I'm
grow
sorry.
up a little more, you know, we'll
Okay,
let you in there with the grown-ups.
Oh my
well, when you
God.
were creating characters, Stan, what was the process back then? I mean, because Rob and I right now, we do our own writing and our own drawing. We
I
we
just
don't
steal from
collaborate
Jack
with
Kirby.
anybody anymore. So
That's the problem, and I've been meaning to talk to you guys about that. Boy, he is one grim-looking guy. There's no way this man can move. He's got to have a power to defy gravity, I would say, just looking at
He's
him.
a tank. I mean, what do you think? I mean,
Now, the funniest thing would be if you say that these are jets and he's the fastest man alive. That and the way you have him, we've got to justify all of this paraphernalia somehow.
okay,
I don't know that you're really doing my character right. That's all right, I guess.
This is
Bunch of beginners.
Right, right.
Overkill
I
him.
just want you to, we have a minute
Oh,
and a
with
half
the
or so.
foot.
I want to tighten those feet.
okay.
All right, guys?
Okay, give him an ankle bone here, an ankle bone
Give it to
here.
Rob, right?
I think somebody.
I think it takes you longer
Ben
to sign
Jones
your
should
name
do
than
Heck
to draw
yeah.
a picture.
For
you know?
it is. I'm gonna step out, okay?
Incidentally, you guys have ruined us. We've decided to give up comics and we're going into showbiz.
All right, so that's H Bomber Guy. That was
Wow.
Larry and Dan react
I'm
to H Bomber Guy's.
not
Stanley
sure
Owens.
anybody needs that, do we?
Well,
You know what we need?
I want to give the guy credit for editing that clip. The best
Yeah,
clip.
we need him to edit some Star Trek stuff together, and then we'll play that, and then we'll react to that, and then they can ding him and not us for Star Trek.
We got it. Let's workshop some ideas, Larry. I think we can probably get away with it. I can at least test it first and see if we can do it. But dude, thanks again for coming in.
Yeah, man. that's
Last
always a
minute.
pleasure. Ow.
For
I'm here. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the president to call me for the secret mission.
Well, you know who else is waiting, Larry? All those people out there who want to send their comics in. They've been waiting, just sitting on the sideline going, what would Dan and Larry think?
Yeah.
You know what they need to do? They need to send those comics to the $1 Million Mailbox. Yeah, that's it. P.O. Box. Wait, let's do that. Let's do that, Lair dog. P.O. Box, 1163 Arcata, California, 95518. Wrap them up. Send them in. I've still got stuff I've got to get to. I'm really sorry I've slowed down in the last few months. Summer vacation has gotten in the way. Work has gotten in the way.
Walker Young's about ready to send you a
get
new
one.
one.
But I've got stuff in the hopper that's going to be coming soon. I try to get at least 1 or 2 of these out a month if I can, when I can. But you know, to tell you the truth, I'm overwhelmed by the quality. This is I've hit the big time, Larry, right? This is big time. Like, they sent me this. I got this in the mail, like
Great
before
stuff.
it was in stores.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I'm so proud of myself.
You're on the list. You're on the comp list.
I love it. I think these are the same guys that sent me the that history of underground comics, and I ended up interviewing that guy too. So
that's
me.
that's not gonna be a trick to find then. That'll be on Amazon because those are real deal publishers.
Dude, it's in stores right now. You could actually walk into your finer comics book and graphic novel proprietors, and they would ideally have it. If not, you can send it along.
$22.99. You know what? I'm gonna, as soon as I get off, I'm gonna get that book and the Paul Rudd Ant-Man book.
Cha-ching! That's money in the bank. That's what the $1 Million Mailbox is all about. Thanks, Larry. I'm gonna get us out of here, and I'll just play the closing credits and get us out of here. I'll see you next time.
Who's on the scene?
Doctor